Welcome to the second episode in this beginner series, and now that you have chosen and purchased your brand new bike, it's time to set it up. And in this video I'm going to guide you through step by step how to do that. This process can seem a little bit intimidating, especially if you're new to cycling or you're not very mechanically inclined. But don't worry, it's not that difficult, and I'm here to guide you all the way. Getting your bike set up correctly is important for a number of reasons. It's going to allow you to be a lot more comfortable on your bike, it's going to prevent injuries, and essentially it's going to help you go faster. Now, before we get started, you are going to need a few tools. I would highly recommend getting a good set of Allen keys and a little multi-tool. Now, that little multi-tool is going to come in handy when you're out riding, you might have a little problem, you might need to adjust something on your bike that you can take with you. Now, the first step is to pop your pedals on the bike if they aren't on there already. Now, this is a relatively simple process, but essentially you just want to make sure the pedals are on there, they're tight and secure. I'm guessing if you're starting out, you're probably going to opt for something like a flat pedal. That is what I started on and what most people start on as well, which are really easy to get used to, and when you're riding, and clipless pedals might be something you want to dive into a little bit later down the line. So now that's all you need to do is pop the pedal onto the crank arm. And I like to do this firstly, just catching the thread by hand. And once it's caught a little bit, I then get my Allen key and tighten it all the way up. Now, sorting out the handlebars early is going to make working on the rest of the bike a lot easier. But hopefully your handlebars are already attached to the bike. You might just want to adjust their positioning. So to do that, all you have to do is undo these 4 bolts right at the front. You only need to undo them a little bit so the handlebars move. You can just loosen them like that without them completely coming off. So personally, I don't like my handlebars pointing up in the sky or way down low. I like them to be somewhere neutral in the middle. So once you've found the position you have them in, and I would recommend having them level, and then dead center in the middle, and you can usually do this just by eye. You then want to take your Allen key and then tighten it back up. This is where a torque wrench really does come in handy. So on most of the bolts or the stem, it'll tell you how tight they need to be. So for example, on this, it's 6 Newton meters. So you can put your torque wrench to 6 Newton meters and then tighten up, and it'll do a little click when it's tight enough. Obviously, if you're doing it by hand, you do want to be careful. Don't be too aggressive and too strong with it and then something snaps. Don't want that to happen. But on the other hand, you don't want it to be so loose that it's going to move when you're out on your bike. So yeah, just go off feel. Now, most new bikes will come with a healthy stack of steerer tubes. Now, the steerer essentially determines how high or low your handlebars will be. Your new bike might come and you might quite like the position of your handlebars, but if you're finding that they are too high or too low, you can easily adjust it if you have enough steerer tube and enough spacers. All you need to do is undo the top cap here, undo the 2 bolts on the side of the stem, and then you can take that off, put it back on, and then you can move your spacers around if you want more spacers on top or underneath. Then basically screw everything together like you took it off. Handlebar width. How do you go about, finding the right handlebars for you? Your bike might come with some that are way too wide for you. Is it okay to stay on that, or should you be changing them to the right size? How important is it? Yeah,
no, pretty important. Probably not quite as important as kind of saddle height, but bar width. Usually, if you buy a smaller bike, it will come with narrow handlebars. We usually go off kind of shoulder width. Ideally, you want your hands to be pretty straight. So this is a reasonably wide bar, and if I kind of offer it up to my shoulders, that's kind of a little bit wider than my shoulder. Then we've got a slightly narrower bar here. I mean, they don't look miles apart from each other. There's probably only a centimetre difference, but you'd feel that on the bike. So yeah, no, it is important, and we usually just rough rule of thumb just off the shoulder width. A wider handlebar is kind of going to make the front end a little bit slower to react. Narrower handlebar is going to make it a little bit sharper, so it will affect the handling of the bike. It also affects the reach of the bike as well, because the narrower your bars are, the further forward your hands are, and the wider your bars are, the further they're coming back towards you. So it affects the whole kind of geometry of the bike a little bit as well. So it is, yeah, it's quite an important aspect of the bike. Usually as you're getting into road biking, it's slightly more comfortable to be a little bit higher at the front. If you're very flexible, you're quite comfortable riding on the drops, and potentially we can just look at lowering it down very slightly. 5mm drop at the front actually is quite a lot, and you will kind of notice a difference. Again, kind of more entry-level bikes, we can put the stem, which affects the height of the front end, up and down quite easily. If you can come down at the front, it's a little bit better. You get a little bit more aero, you lower the centre of gravity, so the bike, go faster. The bike feels a little bit more natural when it's kind of you're on the drops and getting lower. So yeah, but we usually start high-ish.
Next up is your saddle height. Now this is a really important one to get right, because getting this wrong, it can lead to a few injuries. But if you have your saddle way too high, you will feel your hips rocking back and forth and you'll be kind of stretching for the pedals. But then essentially if it's too low, your legs will feel a little bit cramped. So you want to find the perfect saddle height, and to adjust your saddle, it is super easy. So all you need to do is find the bolt that clamps the seat post in place. Then you just want to take your Allen key, we can loosen it off, and it should be able to move up and down. And then you can kind of adjust it into place wherever you want.
If you don't get the saddle height right, you're going to get all sorts of pain. It's really going to put you off riding your bike, so it's very important. So for test rides, to start with, what we do is generally we put the crank arm or the pedal right to the bottom of its stroke, so the lowest it can go. Then we sit on the saddle, put the heel of your foot onto that pedal, and we look for pretty much a straight leg when the heel of your foot is on the pedal, which basically means that when you're riding the bike and you move your foot back, so you're kind of in the riding position, you've got a very slight kink in your knee at the bottom of the stroke, and that is roughly about kind of where we'd start from with saddle height.
Now it can take some time to find your ideal saddle height. You can head out on the road, test it out, but if it doesn't feel right, you can just pull over in a safe place, take out your multi-tool, adjust your saddle up or down, whatever you feel it needs, then get back on the road again and test it out. But when you do find the ideal saddle height, a good tip is to mark the seat post. You could do this with some tape or with just a permanent marker. Just in case anything moves, you can go back and know exactly where your perfect saddle height is. Very tricky question next. How do you go about choosing the right saddle?
Right saddle, yeah, really difficult. We get people coming into the shop saying, I want a comfortable saddle. You cannot just find, they're not labelled comfortable, uncomfortable, unfortunately, I wish they were. We have a machine that you can kind of sit on, it kind of measures your sit bones, which is very important. So that's kind of the width of the saddle. And then there's kind of long saddles or short saddles, saddles with cutouts, saddles without cutouts. A lot of the time, we can roughly get you in the right ballpark by talking to you, looking at you sitting on a bike, but unfortunately it's just a question of putting a saddle on a bike and riding it. If you keep getting problems, then it's potentially the bike fit that's not right rather than the saddle. It's usually where the pain comes from, unfortunately, is your bottom, off the saddle, and sometimes it's not your saddle height that's not right rather than the saddle that's not right.
And is it an option with the saddles to go out and test them before you commit to buying them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so bring your bike down and we can run through a couple of different saddles. We'll put them on your bike for you, go and have a little ride on them. Unfortunately though, with saddles, it's better to do long rides with them for one kind of, maybe a few rides on it before you actually make up your mind. But you can do a quick test ride on a saddle. You think, actually, yeah, I'll try this one, I'll take it home. Yeah, try it, and if it's no good, bring it back.
Now next up, tyre pressure. Now tyre pressure is actually going to have a big effect on how your bike feels. If you run too much air in your tyres, it can feel like quite harsh when you're riding, but if you don't put enough air in, it can feel quite slow and sluggish. Now most tyres will have a maximum inflation number on the side. So on this tyre it is 6.5 bar or 94 psi, and once you're pumping up your tyres, you'll be able to see the gauge going up, and you do not want to go over that number. But you don't actually have to go anywhere close to that number. Depending on how much air you put in your tyres depends on things like how much you weigh or what road surface you're going to be riding on. But it is worth doing a little bit of experimenting with tyre pressure. You can play around with it by 5, 10 psi bar until you find a nice sweet spot for you. I would also recommend investing in a good quality track pump as well. This is going to make pumping up your tyres so much easier. So there you have it. Those are some of my top tips on finding your ideal riding position. But remember, it is going to take a little bit of trial and error to find a position that you are comfortable and happy with. So take your time on this one because it is important to get right. And as always, if you have any other questions, leave them down in the comment section below and I will try and answer them as best as I can. But remember to stay tuned for the very next episode in the beginner series.